So imagine you're just driving to work.
Right.
It's a completely normal Tuesday.
Yeah.
The weather's fine, traffic isn't terrible, and you're just like listening to the radio.
It's just a standard commute.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
But then suddenly, out of nowhere, you feel it. Your chest tightens, your breathing gets really shallow.
Yeah, your hands start to sweat on the steering wheel.
Yes, and this intense, overwhelming wave of panic just washes over you. You look around, trying to figure out what just triggered you, but there's literally nothing there.
No swerving cars, no bad news on your phone.
Right, just an invisible threat.
It's a terrifying experience, and it's one that so many of us can relate to, right?
Oh, for sure.
The immediate reflex is to ask, well, what is wrong with me? Why is my brain doing this?
Right, and usually when we try to answer that question, we treat the mind like a mechanical pocket watch.
Yeah, looking for the broken piece.
Exactly. We assume there's a broken gear somewhere in there. We think, okay, if I just analyze my childhood or, if I just look at what I ate for breakfast, I can find the broken spring, fix it, and the panic will just stop.
But that's where we get it wrong.
Yeah, because what if that sudden wave of panic didn't actually start with you at all?
Right.
What if that fear was planted in your biological hard drive like 3 generations ago by your great-grandfather?
Which completely shatters that whole pocket watch metaphor. I mean, we are not a collection of isolated gears and springs.
No, we really aren't.
We are a living, incredibly vast ecosystem. And if you don't understand the soil of that ecosystem, you'll just spend your entire life fighting weeds without ever realizing where they're coming from.
So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission for you today is, it's massive, but it might be the most important thing we ever explore.
It really is foundational.
We're going to map out the human mind. We're going to look at the exact mechanical root of human suffering, like why you get anxious, why you hold grudges, why you self-sabotage.
All the fun stuff.
All the fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to learn how to actively transform it. And to do this, we are exploring this ancient, incredibly profound framework from Buddhist psychology.
Right, the 8 consciousnesses.
Yes, the 8 consciousnesses, drawing heavily on the teachings of Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh.
And what's beautiful about this specific framework is that it doesn't just offer, abstract philosophy.
Right, it's very practical.
Extremely practical. It gives us a highly functional, precise blueprint of human perception, memory, and habit formation.
But, the terminology can get pretty dense, right?
Oh, absolutely. But thankfully, the teachings offer us this amazing visual anchor. To wrap our heads around all this, Thich Nhat Hanh uses an incredible metaphor.
And it looks almost like a medieval, like a Bruegel-style illuminated manuscript.
Yeah, he calls it the Garden of Consciousness.
I want you to really picture this image in your mind. Imagine a massive split-level world. We're going to start at the bottom.
Down in the dark.
Right. Underground, making up the entire foundation of the image, is a cross-section of dense, dark, incredibly rich soil.
And it's riddled with intricate tunnels and thick root systems.
Yeah, and down in those dark tunnels are all these tiny, busy figures. They are endlessly sorting millions of little seeds into baskets.
Some seeds are dark and thorny and, some are glowing and light.
That's the underground.
And then supported by those roots, above ground is a bustling medieval village.
You see plants growing up from the soil, but they aren't just normal plants.
Right, they bloom into actual life events.
Exactly. There's a grand oak tree whose branches intertwine to form a vibrant, joyful wedding celebration.
Beautiful.
But right next to it, twisting, thorny vines erupt from the ground, and tangled up in those thorns are 2 figures having a furious, red-faced argument.
And in the center of all this chaos, there is a neatly walled garden where a gardener is carefully watering specific plants.
The stakes here are incredibly high. By understanding how those tiny seeds being sorted in the dark soil underground dictate literally everything that happens in the bustling village above.
Meaning your daily reality.
Right, your reality, your arguments, your moments of joy, you can actually figure out the mechanics of your own suffering.
So let's get into the soil. Let's figure out what is happening in the dark down there.
Okay, let's do it. So in this framework, this foundational underground layer is called the 8th consciousness.
Yes. In Sanskrit, it is called the Alayavijnana.
Alayavijnana.
Right, which translates to the store consciousness. In our mental picture, this is that deep, dense soil at the very bottom.
The foundation of everything.
Exactly.
Okay.
It operates continuously 24 hours a day, and it holds every single experience, every action, every thought, and every perception you have ever had.
Just all of it.
All of it. It holds them in the form of what Buddhist psychology calls seeds.
Okay, I have to stop you there because Honestly, the moment I read about an underground storage room for all my thoughts, my brain instantly went to Sigmund Freud.
Oh, sure, the classic unconscious.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds exactly like the Western concept of the unconscious mind, right?
Mm,
Like the dark basement where we lock away our traumatic childhood
our
memories.
repressed urges.
Exactly, all the stuff we don't want to deal with at dinner parties.
Hmm.
Is the store consciousness just like an ancient version of Freud's basement?
It is a very natural comparison to make, but the texts are explicitly clear about a fundamental difference here.
Okay, what is it?
Well, the Western unconscious, especially in the classical Freudian sense, is often framed as a reactive filter. It's an exile zone.
Like a quarantine.
Exactly. It's a dark, locked room separate from the bright living room of your conscious mind. And we usually only go down there with a therapist, with flashlight, to figure out why we are broken.
Right.
The Buddhist store consciousness is entirely different. It is a functional, non-dual database.
Okay, non-dual meaning it isn't separate from the rest of the house.
Exactly. It isn't a basement at all. It's the very ground the house is built on. It is the foundation that manifests your entire reality. And more importantly, it doesn't judge the seeds.
Right. Freud's basement is full of monsters, but the store consciousness holds everything.
Everything. Every single act of kindness you've ever witnessed, the smell of rain on hot pavement from when you were 10 years old, every mathematical equation you've memorized.
And yes, every trauma.
Right. It doesn't label a seed good or bad and shove the bad ones into a dark corner. It simply preserves them all neutrally.
So it's literally just soil.
Yes. It maintains them in the soil until the right environmental conditions arise for a specific seed to sprout up into your conscious mind.
Okay, so it is just soil holding seeds. But that raises a massive question for me.
Which is?
How do these seeds get into my soil in the first place? I mean, obviously, I plant seeds every day through my actions. I drink a cup of coffee. I plant a seed of experiencing coffee. I yell at someone in traffic. I plant a seed of anger. But the framework says that not all seeds are planted by our individual real-time actions.
No, definitely not.
We're born with seeds already in the soil.
You did not arrive in this world as an empty plot of land. Many of the seeds in your store consciousness were transmitted to you. They are innate.
They come from your parents.
Yes, your parents, your deep ancestors, your genetics, and your society. You inherit seeds of deep-seated trauma and fear, but you also inherit seeds of resilience, of musical aptitude, of profound joy.
This part blew my mind because this ancient, thousands of years old philosophical concept maps almost identically onto cutting-edge modern science.
The epigenetics research.
Yes. The sources brought up this fascinating research regarding genetics and epigenetics. Scientists took a generation of mice and exposed them to the scent of cherry blossoms while simultaneously giving them mild electric shock.
A classic fear conditioning experiment.
Right. So those mice learned to associate fear with the smell of cherry blossoms.
Makes sense.
But here's the crazy part. Those mice had babies.
Yeah.
And those babies, who had never been shocked in their lives, showed a fear response to the scent of cherry blossoms.
Wow.
And then their babies did too. The researchers found that it took up to 7 generations for that specific epigenetic trait that inherited trauma response to stop reappearing.
7 generations.
7.
I mean, it completely reframes how we view our own emotional reactions. Think back to that southern wave of panic in the car we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
When you feel an intense burst of anxiety, or conversely, a profound, unexplained aptitude for a certain skill, it is entirely possible that this is an inherited seed sprouting.
So you're not just dealing with your own personal baggage.
Exactly. You are dealing with the habit energies of your ancestors. The soil is ancient.
And the sources say the soil is also shared, which is wild. If we look back at our Bruegel painting, above the village, there is a sky.
Right.
There is a shared moon, shared stars, and shared weather systems raining down on all the individual gardens.
Yes. Our store consciousness isn't just an isolated, private hard drive sitting in a vacuum. It is intimately linked to the collective.
Like Carl Jung stuff.
Carl Jung definitely touched on this with his idea of the collective unconscious, but this Buddhist framework takes it into the mechanics of our daily lives.
How so?
Well, the stock market, our concepts of what is fashionable, our definitions of beauty, success, or failure, these are all manifestations of collective seeds.
Which is so humbling, because we love to think we are these purely independent, rational actors.
We really do.
You go to a department store, you look at a rack of ties or a row of shoes, and you pick one. You think, okay, I chose this because it expresses my unique individual aesthetic.
Right.
But the text literally says, the moment you see a tie that aligns with the seeds in your store consciousness, the necktie chooses you.
I love that line. It's so true. Your individual choices are deeply, inextricably informed by the collective seeds of your culture. There is no seed in your soil that is 100% purely individual or purely collective.
They constantly interact.
They do.
Okay, let me make sure I have this straight. The store consciousness is this vast neutral soil. It is a database holding millions of individual and collective seeds, just waiting for the right environmental conditions to sprout.
You've got it.
But the soil itself is completely neutral, and it doesn't judge right from wrong.
Why are we so miserable?
Yes. Why do we suffer? What is causing all these dark, thorny vines of anger, anxiety, and delusion to sprout up and strangle the village?
Well, to answer that, we have to move up from the deep soil to the intricate root system. And this brings us to the most problematic, troublemaking layer of the human mind.
Okay, let's meet the villain of the story.
In a way, yes, this is the seventh consciousness known as Manas.
Manas.
Right. If the store consciousness is the vast, deep, neutral ocean, Manas is the gravitational pull of the moon that causes the relentless crashing tides.
Okay.
Manas arises from the store consciousness, but then it does something tragic. It turns around, blindly grasps a tiny localized piece of that vast interconnected store consciousness, and fiercely declares, "This is me."
It creates an ego.
Exactly. It says, "This is mine. I am a separate, independent entity from everything else."
The sources use this incredible analogy. They describe Manas as a blind lover.
I love that imagery.
It's so good. It doesn't actually see reality. It doesn't see the vast shared ocean. Instead, it creates an imaginary, isolated representation of a self, and it falls madly, blindly in love with that illusion.
And like a jealous lover, it becomes entirely obsessed with protecting this imaginary me at all costs.
So it is the ultimate origin of the human ego.
Yes, Manas is a constant churning energy of discrimination. It is running 24/7, constantly scanning the environment and measuring
Measuring what?
what is me, what is not me, what benefits me, what threatens me. And because its love is fundamentally blind to the reality that we are all interconnected, its attempts to protect the self actually end up deeply isolating the self.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
I am stepping out of the monastery and onto a busy city street. Isn't a survival instinct a good thing?
Well, sure.
If a bus is speeding toward me, I want an ego. I need a mechanism that says, hey, this fragile physical body is ME, and I need to jump out of the way so I don't get crushed. We literally need manas to survive, don't we?
You absolutely do. And the Buddhist framework does not deny the practical reality of living in a physical body.
Right, you still have to look both ways before crossing the street.
Exactly. Manas is the instinct to pull your hand away from a hot stove. It is the reflex to wake up when you hear a loud noise in the dark. The problem isn't that this survival mechanism exists.
Then what is the problem?
The problem, as the text outlines, is that its fundamental nature is obscured by ignorance.
Ignorant of what?
Ignorance of interbeing. Because Manas cannot see the big picture, because it thinks it is entirely separate from the rest of the universe, it takes that healthy dodge-the-bus instinct and applies it to literally everything.
Oh, I see.
It creates psychological and emotional threats where none exist. Its constant neurotic discrimination creates what Buddhist psychology calls internal knots.
Internal knots. That is such a visceral term. You can almost feel it in your gut, you know?
Exactly. The Sanskrit term is samyojana. Because Manas is always operating from a place of deep-seated fear and separation, it takes our raw experiences and ties them up into dense blocks of craving, anger, and delusion.
So it's a survival instinct gone into overdrive.
It is a misguided attempt to survive that ends up suffocating us. It drives us to hoard resources, to react defensively to minor criticisms, to lash out at our partners, all to protect a self that is ultimately just a mental construct.
So Manas is essentially a paranoid security guard living in the basement.
That's a great way to put it.
He is sitting there in the dark, furiously watching the security feeds, slamming the panic button, tying the building in knots, completely unaware that the building is actually perfectly safe and intimately connected to the rest of the city.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. But here is the crucial mechanical detail.
Okay.
Manas, the paranoid security guard in the basement, doesn't actually interact with the outside world directly.
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't have its own eyes or ears. It is trapped in the root system. So to gather intelligence, it has to outsource the job. It relies on the active, thinking part of our brain to interface with the environment.
Which brings us above ground.
Yes.
We are finally leaving the dark soil and the twisted roots, and we are stepping out into the sunlight of the village. We are entering the garden.
Welcome to the sixth consciousness, the mind consciousness.
In our Bruegel painting, if the store consciousness is the soil and Manas is the twisted roots, the mind consciousness is the gardener.
The active thinker.
Right.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this deep dive right now, it is your mind consciousness that is analyzing the words, processing the metaphors, and making judgments about what makes sense and what doesn't.
The gardener is the root of all our conscious speech and deliberate actions. Now, there's a very important distinction here.
What's that?
Well, we established that the store consciousness and manas run continuously, 24/7, like an unstoppable background operating system.
Right.
But the mind consciousness can actually power down.
Right. The text points out that it turns off when we are in a deep, dreamless sleep, or if we undergo anesthesia or go into a coma. The gardener can take a break.
Correct. But when the gardener is awake and working, they don't work alone. To tend the garden and gather data from the world, the mind consciousness relies on the first 5 consciousnesses.
Which are sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch.
Right. And the sources describe these 5 sense consciousnesses beautifully as waves upon the water.
So you open your eyes, the wave of eye consciousness arises.
Oh,
You hear a bird sing, the wave of ear consciousness arises.
exactly.
It seems incredibly simple and straightforward. But I'm guessing this is exactly where the mechanics of our suffering start to click into place. Because things don't stay simple, do they?
They rarely do. The text explains that we experience the world through 3 distinct fields of perception.
Okay.
The first field is direct reality. The sources call this the realm of things in themselves.
Which means seeing things exactly as they are.
Yes. It is pure, unfiltered sensory data. Your eye consciousness perceives a flower without attaching a name to it, without judging its color, without remembering the time someone gave you a similar flower.
It's just pure presence.
Just pure presence. But as human beings, we spend almost 0 time in direct reality.
Because the gardener gets involved.
Instantly.
Yeah.
The moment the raw data comes in, the mind consciousness grabs it. But remember, the mind consciousness is heavily influenced by the paranoia of manas down in the roots.
Ah.
So it pulls the raw data out of direct reality and instantly forces it into the second field of perception, the realm of representation.
Representations. Meaning we aren't seeing the thing, we are seeing our mental image of the thing.
Exactly.
Let's use the classic analogy from the text, because it's the perfect way to understand this.
The snake and the rope.
Right. Okay. Imagine you are walking down a dirt path at dusk. The light is terrible. You look ahead in the path, and your visual waves send raw data of a long, curving shape on the ground.
That is the direct reality, just a shape.
But instantly, your mind consciousness, whipped into a frenzy by Manas screaming, "Protect the self," dips down into the store consciousness, grabs an ancient inherited seed of fear, and projects an image over the shape.
You recognize a snake.
And your reaction to that representation is entirely real.
Oh, yeah. Your heart rate spikes.
Wow.
Adrenaline floods your system. You jump backward, completely terrified.
But then you take out a flashlight, you shine it on the path, and you see the truth. It is just a piece of frayed rope.
That is the realm of representations. The terror was real, the physical reaction was real, but it was generated entirely by a mental construction.
You weren't reacting to reality.
No, you were reacting to an illusion created by your own mind, heavily colored by past seeds and survival instinct.
By the way, just to complete the theory,
Yeah.
the third field of perception is mere images.
Right.
That's when you are sitting safely in your living room, daydreaming about a snake or having a nightmare about one. There isn't even a rope to trigger it. It is pure mental projection.
Exactly. But it is the realm of representations that causes the vast majority of our daily suffering.
Because we spend our whole lives reacting to snakes that are actually ropes.
Precisely.
I mean, think about getting a text message from your boss that says, "See me in my office." That text is just pixels on a screen. It is a piece of rope.
But your mind consciousness immediately projects a snake.
I'm getting fired. I did the report wrong. I'm going to lose my house.
And you go into full physiological panic over a representation.
And the tragedy is, we do this not just with texts, but with the people we love. The sources share a heartbreaking story that illustrates the real-world stakes of living in representations.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
It's a story about a father who, due to some unfortunate circumstances and misunderstandings, suspected that his young son was not biologically his.
Right.
He became convinced the boy was the child of a neighbor. But out of pride or fear, He never actually confronted his wife. He just locked the suspicion inside.
Which means he allowed Manus to tie a massive, dense internal knot of betrayal and resentment.
For years, this man looked at the little boy and literally could not see his own son. He only saw the neighbor's face.
He lived entirely in a realm of representation.
Every time the boy laughed, the father felt coldness. Every time the boy asked for affection, the father pulled away. It caused immense, agonizing suffering for him, for his confused wife, and especially for the child who was rejected for no reason.
It is a devastating example because the suffering was entirely self-generated.
And how did it end? Years later, a visiting friend came to the house. The friend looked at the boy, looked at the father, and said, "Wow, he looks exactly like you did at that age."
And in that single second, the flashlight was turned on.
The representation shattered. The father suddenly saw the direct reality. The boy was undeniably his son.
But while the illusion vanished, the years of pain, the ruined childhood, the distance in his marriage, those couldn't be instantly erased.
That is the consequence of distortion. We mistake our mental image of the world for the world itself.
We mistake the menu for the meal. We let Manus distort what our senses pick up, filtering every interaction through old seeds of fear, prejudice, and inherited trauma.
So we have this active gardener, our mind consciousness, taking flawed, paranoid instructions from the roots and using those distorted perceptions to actively water the seeds in our deep soil.
Right.
And because we are constantly reacting to false threats, to imaginary snakes, we end up cultivating some deeply rooted, incredibly stubborn weeds in our daily lives.
Let's examine how these weeds actually take over the garden. Every action we take, every word we speak, and every thought we think based on these distorted perceptions plants a new seed or waters an existing one.
Okay.
And when we repeat an action over and over, we create what the framework calls a habit energy.
The Sanskrit term for this is vasana. And the texts use this gorgeous, incredibly vivid analogy to explain how habit energies form. They talk about making jasmine tea.
Yes.
If you want to make high-quality jasmine tea, you don't just dump some artificial flavoring into hot water.
No, it is a slow process of absorption. You take fresh, unflavored tea leaves, and you place them in a tightly sealed box alongside fresh, highly fragrant jasmine flowers.
And you just leave them there for weeks.
Slowly, day by day, the tea leaves absorb the scent, the perfume of the flowers. By the time you brew the tea, the leaves themselves hold the essence of the jasmine.
Our consciousness is highly absorbent, exactly like those tea leaves. We are constantly absorbing the perfume of our environments, our repeated thoughts, and our daily behaviors.
And this perfuming process is what creates our habit energies.
So if you grew up in a household where the adults yell and slam doors every time they are stressed, your consciousness absorbs that perfume.
Yes. The behavioral loop of stress equals shouting becomes a deeply ingrained habit energy. The neural pathways are reinforced.
And the text points out something that feels very true, if a little frustrating. Negative habit energies seem to form and take root much faster than positive ones.
Oh, definitely.
It takes years of dedicated practice to cultivate a deep, sustained habit of patience or, I don't know, a love for classical literature. But you can form a habit of doom scrolling on your phone to numb anxiety, or pouring a heavy drink to forget a bad day in a matter of weeks.
Because those negative habits are often driven by the internal knots, the samyojana that Manus tied up in the basement.
Yeah, the nuts.
The internal knot is the deep-seated pain, the raw nerve. The habit energy is the behavioral loop we invent to cope with it. You feel rejected, the internal knot of unworthiness tightens, and the habit energy kicks in and says, eat an entire sleeve of cookies or pick a fight with your spouse to regain a sense of control.
Okay, here's a place where I really need to pause and push back on the text, because it contradicts a lot of modern advice.
Let's hear it.
Let's say I have a massive internal knot of anger.
Hmm?
It is tight, it is painful, and it is causing me to snap at my coworkers. A lot of pop psychology has told us that the solution is catharsis.
Right, let it all out.
Yeah, if you are angry, let it out. Go to a rage room and smash some old televisions with a baseball bat. Scream into a pillow. Repressing it sounds like a terrible idea. Won't bottling it up just give me an ulcer.
It is a very common Western approach, but the Buddhist framework offers a stark, profound correction here. The mechanics of the eight consciousnesses show us why rage rooms are actually counterproductive.
Really?
Pounding a pillow or smashing a TV does not untie the internal knot. In fact, what you are actually doing is rehearsing the anger.
Rehearsing it, like a play.
Exactly. You are providing the perfect environmental conditions for the seed of anger to manifest as a mental formation. And by physically acting it out, by engaging your mind, consciousness, and your body in the act of destruction, you are actively, vigorously watering that negative seed.
Wow.
You are sending a loud signal down to your store consciousness that says, yes, this is how we handle stress. More of this, please. You are deepening the perfume of rage.
So unmindful venting actually strengthens the habit energy. But wait, you said repressing it is bad too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Repression is just violently shoving the sprouting weed back down into the dark soil. It doesn't kill the weed. It just lets it fester, grow in the dark, and eventually explode when you least expect it.
So we shouldn't vent and we shouldn't repress.
Right. If unmindful venting is one extreme and repression is the other, Buddhist psychology offers a third, much more powerful way: transformation.
Transformation. That sounds beautiful in theory, but mechanically, how do we actually do that? How do we stop the gardener, our mind consciousness, from blindly watering these weeds of anger and fear?
We clearly need a different tool to tend this garden.
We do. And that tool is the core of the entire practice. We are moving into the practical application now. The tool is mindfulness.
Right. In our garden metaphor, if the mind consciousness is the gardener, the texts say mindfulness is the sunlight.
Think about how sunlight operates. When sunlight shines on a garden, it doesn't fight the plants. It doesn't argue with the leaves.
It simply bathes them in energy.
And when vegetation receives that light, it naturally responds and grows. When the light of mindfulness shines on our mental formations, they are fundamentally altered. They are transformed.
Let's break down the mechanics of how that sunlight actually works, because it can sound a bit mystical.
Yeah, let's ground it.
As I understand it, mindfulness creates a micropause. When you are mindless, a stimulus happens. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and you immediately react. Stimulus, reaction.
No space between them.
Exactly. But mindfulness introduces a tiny gap. It says, anger has arrived. And in that micropause, manas loses its total grip. You stop identifying as the anger and you start observing the anger.
You step out of the realm of representations and back toward direct reality.
Precisely. And the practice of applying the sunlight starts with a concept called selective watering.
Collective watering.
Right. Since your store consciousness holds every conceivable kind of seed, both the poisonous weeds and the beautiful flowers, you have a profound choice in what you cultivate.
The text suggests we essentially sign a peace treaty with ourselves, and even with the people we love. We explicitly agree to actively water the seeds of joy, compassion, and understanding in each other, and we agree to stop watering the negative seeds.
So if you know your partner has a deep inherited seed of insecurity or jealousy, you don't poke at it during an argument just to win points.
It's just watering a weed.
Exactly. You starve that negative seed of attention. And conversely, when they do something kind, you acknowledge it. You nourish the positive seeds.
But obviously we aren't perfect. Weeds are going to pop up.
They always do.
When suffering inevitably arises, when internal knot tightens and you feel that wave of panic or rage, the framework gives us 3 distinct methods to handle it.
The first method is indirect, which aligns with selective watering. When a negative seed sprouts, you don't engage with it directly.
What do you do instead?
You deliberately focus on watering a positive seed so that it grows tall and naturally outcompetes the weed.
So if your mind is full of vibrant flowers of gratitude, the weeds of envy simply have less room and fewer resources to take over.
You change the channel in your brain. But sometimes a weed pops up that is just too big to ignore.
Yeah, you get hit with a wave of intense, blinding anger. You can't just think about happy thoughts.
That requires the second method, mere recognition.
I absolutely love the imagery here.
Yeah.
When anger kicks down the door, you don't fight it, you don't punch a pillow, and you don't shove it in the closet. You greet it at the door like an old, somewhat difficult friend.
You literally say, breathing in, I know I am angry. Hello, my old friend, anger.
It sounds so simple, but what is the mechanism there? Why is saying hello help?
Because of the micropause you mentioned earlier, by merely recognizing the emotion without judging it, without calling it bad or wrong, you are bringing the pure sunlight of mindfulness directly to the mental formation.
You are not fighting the dark. You are just turning on the light.
And because mindfulness is a powerful high-frequency energy, just the act of observing the anger with compassion begins to weaken its structural integrity. It loses some of its terrifying power simply by being seen clearly.
It is like being a kid terrified of a monster in the closet.
Exactly.
The moment your parents turn on the bedroom light, the monster turns back into a pile of laundry. The shadow loses its power.
It really does. But then there is the third method, and the texts offer a very serious warning here.
Yes, proceed with caution.
This method is only for when you have built up a significant amount of stability, focus, and strength in your mindfulness practice. This is the practice of inviting it up.
Instead of waiting for a random trigger in your environment to bring up a painful memory or an internal knot, you intentionally, purposefully call it up from the dark soil of the stored consciousness into the bright living room of the mind consciousness.
You bring up the old trauma, the deep regret, the inherited grief, but you do it while your lamp of mindfulness is burning as brightly as possible. You deliberately bathe that old pain in the light of awareness.
The analogy they use here is intense, but necessary. It is like handling a highly poisonous snake.
Right. If you are walking in the dark and you stumble upon a cobra, which is what happens when trauma gets triggered unexpectedly, you are going to panic, you are going to react blindly, and you are almost certainly going to get bitten.
The snake controls the situation.
But if you are a scientist and you want to extract the venom from that cobra to make life-saving antivenom, you don't just grab it barehanded.
No, you study it first. You put on thick protective gear. You handle it in a brightly lit, highly controlled laboratory environment using the proper tools.
And you only do it when you are well-rested, highly trained, and strong enough to manage the animal.
Mindfulness is that protective gear.
Okay.
It is that controlled laboratory. You don't fight the snake of your trauma, but you respect its deadly power, and you use your sustained awareness to handle it safely until you can extract the wisdom from it.
It is a brilliant analogy. And this specific process of extracting wisdom from our pain leads us to one of the most beautiful paradigm-shifting concepts in all of Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings.
It's the concept of composting.
Turning garbage into flowers.
Even while blooming, the flower is already in the compost, and the compost is already in the flower. It is the profound reality of inner being.
In modern Western culture, we have a total obsession with eradication. We want to throw our garbage away. We want to completely eliminate our pain, surgically remove our flaws, and permanently delete our bad habits.
We want to be pristine.
But in the reality of interbeing, nothing ever truly goes away. It only changes form. A master gardener doesn't take their rotting kitchen scraps and throw them in a landfill. They compost them.
They put the banana peels and the coffee grounds into a bin, they add a little heat a little time, and they let it break down. And eventually that foul-smelling garbage transforms into the richest, darkest, most nutrient-dense soil imaginable.
Soil that will grow next year's prize-winning roses.
So our anger, our fear, our ignorance, our jealousy, that is our garbage. And instead of hating ourselves for having garbage, we are supposed to compost it.
Yes. Because without the garbage, there is no compost. And without compost, you cannot grow flowers. It completely reframes our relationship to our own flaws.
Nirvana and samsara, enlightenment and suffering, are not two separate geographical locations. You don't escape your suffering to find enlightenment on a mountaintop.
Enlightenment is found within the suffering, by looking deeply into it and transforming it. Your deepest pain is the exact raw material required for your greatest wisdom.
There's a quote from the text. I transform the garbage in me so that you don't have to suffer. When you realize your suffering isn't just your own, but inherited from your ancestors, composting it becomes an act of generational healing.
But the sources are also extremely realistic about this. Doing this kind of deep composting, handling these poisonous snakes, is practically impossible to do in total isolation.
We are social creatures. We need a sangha.
A sangha is a community of practice. Think back to the jasmine tea analogy. We effortlessly absorb the perfume of our environment.
So if you are trying to transform deep, stubborn habit energies of anger, anxiety, or addiction, but you are spending all your time surrounded by people who are constantly watering those negative seeds, people who thrive on drama, cynicism, or outrage, it is like trying to dry yourself off with a towel while standing in a thunderstorm.
You need an environment that provides a different perfume. You need to be surrounded by people who are also practicing mindfulness, who can gently remind you to breathe when you get triggered, who actively water your seeds of joy and calm.
The environment dictates which seeds sprout. The sangha is what makes the heavy lifting of transformation actually sustainable in daily life.
So let's look at the ultimate trajectory here. If we practice this selective watering, if we diligently and bravely compost our garbage with the sunlight of mindfulness, and if we lean on our sangha for the right perfume,
Something incredible eventually happens.
the transformation doesn't just stay on the surface level of the mind consciousness, it sinks down, it penetrates the roots and reaches the bedrock.
Which brings us to the final, most profound stage of our deep dive, the harvest. What actually happens when we succeed in this practice? What is the end goal of the 8 consciousnesses?
The ultimate goal is a state the framework calls Ashraya Parivriti, which translates to transformation at the base.
Transformation at the base, meaning we aren't just pruning the weeds above ground anymore. We aren't just managing our symptoms.
We are fundamentally altering the chemistry of the deep soil.
And this is a crucial distinction. Very often, we get stuck at a purely intellectual level of healing. We read a great book on psychology, we map out our childhood trauma on a whiteboard, we understand logically why we act the way we do, and we declare ourselves healed.
But the text explicitly calls this mere intellectual understanding a knowledge obstacle.
A knowledge obstacle. So knowing too much can actually block healing.
Yes, if it stays trapped in the mind consciousness, you can logically know that a piece of rope is not a snake. But if your heart still races every time you see one, you haven't healed the root.
Right. True liberation requires reaching down into the 8th consciousness and transforming the deeply buried seeds themselves.
And so when that profound transformation reaches the base, what happens to Manas? What happens to that paranoid security guard in the basement, that blind lover who has spent our entire lives desperately clinging to the illusion of a separate self and tying all those painful internal knots?
This is the true climax of the Buddhist path. The text described this as reaching the 8th stage of the Bodhisattva path.
At this stage of deep, sustained, unwavering mindfulness and insight, the ultimate illusion shatters.
The absolute truth of interbeing, the realization that you are made of everyone and everything else, that there is no separate self to protect, is no longer just a cool philosophical idea you read in a book. It becomes your realized, lived reality.
And when that happens, the security guard finally realizes there are no walls to guard. There are no enemies outside the gates because the gates don't exist.
Exactly. In that moment of profound realization, Manas releases its desperate, blind grip on the store consciousness. The frantic grasping simply stops. The engine of discrimination shuts down.
And without the gravitational pull of Manas constantly whipping up the tides, what happens to the store consciousness?
The vast ocean finally settles. The water becomes completely, perfectly still. It purifies. It stops being a dark, cluttered storage basement full of reactive seeds, and it transforms into something breathtaking.
The texts call it great mirror wisdom.
Great mirror wisdom, pure consciousness. The text says that when the store consciousness becomes great mirror wisdom, it reflects the entire cosmos perfectly, without a single distortion.
There are no more representations. There is no more mistaking ropes for snakes. The mind simply reflects reality exactly as it is. It sees the absolute truth, that the one contains the all, and the all contains the one.
I want to spend a moment on this because it sounds so transcendent, almost untouchable. But what does great mirror wisdom actually look like in a normal Tuesday reality? If someone has achieved this transformation at the base, how do they move through the world? If they drop their favorite coffee mug and it shatters, what happens?
Well, the mug still shatters. The direct reality is the same. But the reaction is entirely different. For us, the broken mug triggers Manas.
We project a representation. I am clumsy. This always happens to me. My day is ruined. An internal knot tightens.
For a mind operating with great mirror wisdom, they just see broken ceramic. They feel a moment of mild practical concern, they grab a broom, sweep it up, and move on. There's no suffering added to the event.
What if it's something much heavier? What if someone with great mirror wisdom experiences a profound loss? The death of a loved one? Do they just feel nothing? Are they a robot?
Not at all. In fact, they feel it more purely than we do. They experience the profound, genuine sorrow of loss in direct reality, but they don't experience the secondary, manufactured suffering that we pile on top of it.
They don't fall into the trap of, why did this happen to me? The universe is unfair. I will never be happy again.
Because they truly see inner being, they see that their loved one is not permanently gone, but has simply changed form, like a cloud becoming rain. The mirror reflects the sorry perfectly, but it does not hold on to it. When the event passes, the mirror is clear again.
When you zoom out and look at the narrative arc of this entire framework, it is just spectacular. We started underground in this dark, cluttered soil filled with centuries of inherited trauma, collective fears, and our own messy, perfumed habit energies.
We met the blind ego of Manas, furiously tying knots of anxiety and isolation.
Then we met the gardener, our active mind consciousness, constantly tricked into watering the weeds of our suffering because it was reacting to imaginary snakes.
But then we found the tool. We brought in the sunlight of mindfulness. We learned to create that micropause. We stopped fighting our garbage and learned how to compost it into flowers.
And finally, through all that diligent, patient gardening, supported by a community, the dark soil transforms. The frantic security guard clocks out for good, and the mind becomes a pristine, perfectly still mirror, reflecting the stars.
It is a blueprint not just for understanding why we hurt, but for complete and total liberation.
It is a profound, paradigm-altering shift. You go from being a passive victim of your inherited subconscious to becoming the active, mindful cultivator of your own reality. It is the journey from delusion to great mirror wisdom.
So we have mapped the garden of consciousness, from the ancient seeds in the store consciousness, through the blind ego of Manas, to the active gardening of mind consciousness, and the transformative power of mindfulness to compost our suffering into wisdom. We've covered a lot of ground today.
If we leave you with one final reflection today, something to carry with you long after this deep dive ends, it is this. The next time you feel a sudden flash of anger at a coworker, or a spontaneous wave of joy when you hear a certain song, don't just experience it blindly. Create that space. Ask yourself, who really planted this seed? Was it me just now? Or was it planted generations ago by someone I've never met? And more importantly, now that it's here, am I going to water it today?
The garden is yours.
The choice is yours. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 8 consciousnesses. We wish you well in tending your own gardens.